Welcome to Exploring the Arts. I'm your host, Ed Colley. Today we're at the Pingree School here in Hamilton. We're going inside, we're going to meet Jennifer Goldfinger, and she is an illustrator, children's illustrator. So why don't you just follow me and watch your step. We are in, of all places right now, the Teachers Lounge here at Pingree School. And my guest today for Exploring the Arts is Jennifer Goldfinger. And welcome to Exploring the Arts, Jen.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You know your dad and I are friends.
I do.
First of all, you're an illustrator. Can you tell us a little bit about your history, how it all started, how you got into illustration in the first place?
Well, I was a fine art major at UMass Amherst, and I always loved to paint. And I was actually painting murals for private homes and restaurants, trompe l'oeil, to deceive the eye, very realistic stuff. And I was dating a guy who was a children's book author illustrator. His name was Michael Emberley. His dad, Ed Emberley, is a Caldecott winner and children's book author illustrator. And Michael broke his wrist mountain biking while working on a book called Rudolph's Second Christmas by Robert May, who wrote the original Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And he asked a bunch of other illustrators if they could imitate his style to finish the book. And I did it as well without him really knowing. He was away for the weekend, and I did a bunch of sketches, and the publisher picked me to finish the book. So after I did that, I just loved it so much. I didn't know what I wanted to do with art. I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I wasn't sure in which direction. So after that, I did a bunch of illustrations that were, now I don't think they were very good, but at the time they were what I could do. And I sent out postcards, and Little Brown got in touch with me, the vice president, and said, let's get some books out of you. So my first book was done with Little Brown, this one, Fish Named Spot.
A fish named Spot. How did this fish get its name?
Well, he's spotted, and he's supposed to be, the kid thinks of him as being like a dog. Mm-hmm. So I wanted him to have kind of a dog quality. But I thought of this story when I had a 3-year-old, and I was 8 months pregnant, and I had a husband in medical school, and I had no time to really, and I had no childcare. So I did the book with a kid bouncing on my lap, a brand new baby, and it's, it was my first foray into children's book.
When you write a book, what comes first? The illustrations, the images, or the writing?
It depends. For each book it's different. With that one, it kind of happened at the same time. With my dog Lyle, these are stories that actually happened with my dog, and I was doing sketches of him, and so that kind of happened at the same time in a way, but I did, the original drawings are of my dog. Oh, I should show you that other picture I have. I have a picture of Lyle actually in a tutu with a little tiara on. But
you mean the real dog? The
real dog. And I found it after I finished the book. After, like years later, I was like, oh my gosh.
And you didn't realize it?
No. I mean, I do remember putting a tutu on him and all the things that actually happened in the story. But, and when I had just gotten the contract for that book, Lyle actually passed away. So I got a new dog, a golden doodle, that we named Lila. And slowly the illustrations became puffier and puffier because I had a new model in the house who didn't look like Lyle. So I had to go back to earlier illustrations and puff up the face to make it match my other dog.
You know, I did the very same thing.
Yeah?
I had a cartoon strip, and in the strip we had a golden retriever, and I got a greyhound, and I changed the golden retriever into a greyhound.
Yeah, you can't help it. That's what your
I
surroundings
couldn't stop
are.
myself. That's funny.
Right.
That's funny.
Yeah, and then there's another story that I'm doing that I just finished with HarperCollins. Mm-hmm. That one very much came from a drawing that I did. It was Halloween, and I wanted to do a promotional postcard, which is what all illustrators do to kind of keep in the mind of the publishers. And I did a promotional postcard of a cat and a boy in a cat suit. And one of the publishers got in touch with me and said, "Do you have a story to go with it?" And I was like, "Okay, sure, yeah."
You know, before I met you, and I came to see your exhibit, I had a sense of Maurice Sendak a little bit in some of your work too. I could see.
I love hearing that.
Is that a big influence on you?
No, not at all, but
No?
I just think his stuff is amazing, so I'm thrilled that you...
I did. I said,
Yeah.
wow, this reminds me of his work. It
Yeah.
was really nice.
Oh, good.
Well,
Is it because of the boy in the cat suit or the style?
The style.
Oh,
The
good.
style.
All right.
Yes.
I'll
Will
take
you
that.
explain a little bit about your style here?
Yeah, so this is actually, this isn't quite exactly what the two-page spread will be. In the end, there's a chalkboard behind it. But what I did here, this is all painted, and then I scan it in, and then I do digital collage with Photoshop. And this one isn't really a good example of that because I don't have any of the other elements. With the book, there's real wood grain, and there's real pictures of trees that have wood in it. And so I'd mixed a lot. I did a lot of layers in Photoshop to put it together. So this is one of the two-page spreads where this little boy changes his name from Toby to Tiger.
It's very, very expressive, kind of exciting.
Yeah.
But this is just a rough draft, is it not?
This is a digital picture that I scanned, and this is what I printed up myself, but it's going to look like this.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, these are roughs.
Mhm.
So this is the sketch. This is sort of the beginning, and I felt like it was getting muddy, and I printed it again, and I painted it here. And so this didn't make the cut in the book, and it's not even the right colors. This is one of the ones I showed the publisher initially that I thought it would go this way, but I ended up feeling it was a little muddy, and I wanted to go more with this kind of redder orangey.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, quite a difference. This is more lively and vivacious than the other one's very drab and
Yeah,
Kind
yeah,
of,
I don't know. And these were the paints that happened to be in my studio at the time.
Ah.
You know, I had to go out and buy these paints because I was like, I want this to be cadmium red.
What do you use for paint? Do you use a designer color or do you use watercolors? Or what?
For this, I did a lot. It was a combination of watercolor, colored pencil, acrylic, gouache, and photography.
You also have a storyboard. I'd like to
Yeah.
take a look at it and
So
kind of
this
explain
is-
what a storyboard is,
Yeah, this
how
is
it works.
the thumbnail. So every picture book has 32 pages in it, and this isn't showing all 32 pages. And this is actually from the book, The King's Chorus, which is this one that somebody else wrote and I illustrated.
Okay.
So when I was working on this, because they were a new publisher to me, this is Houghton Mifflin, Clarion, which is an imprint. I drew up a bunch of thumbnails to get a sense of how the structure of the words in the illustrations were going to go with the 32 pages that are in the book. So this was the process, and I blew this up because I take this to schools to show them, and I wanted a nice big piece of it. But a lot of these drawings, these were drawn like this big. This is how big they really are. And some of them actually became the actual drawings. Like, I mean, this is the cover.
Yeah, that's interesting because, well, you mentioned it's a thumbnail sketch because it allows you an opportunity to, in a very small area, create this composition.
Yeah.
And it's not even a serious thing for you. It's just an idea kind of thing. But sometimes a little thumbnail sketch is beautiful, is it not?
It is, and it shows you get the sense of the design of the layout that you want to have, and it's less overwhelming. You know, when you want to put something down, you want to do it any way you want and then go back and fix it. But sometimes the way you put it down is the way it ends up.
Okay, now I'm asking a question. I
Finishing.
don't know the answers to these things, but I'm very curious about this thumbnail sketching and the final product.
Yeah.
I noticed that you said there were like 32 pages in a
Yeah.
Is that always a given, 32 pages in a...
Most of the
They
time
do
it
this?
is.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know that.
My new book that's coming out, the one, Hello, My Name is Tiger, is 40 pages. It's always in eight-page increments.
Why is that?
It's the way the folding of the paper goes
Okay.
and how it all works
So when you
together.
compose this, because you're working on a double page,
Right.
You have to divide it equally in halves.
You divide it in half, and you have to pay
my-
attention to the
yeah,
gutter,
so
you
my
don't get
point
anything in
is,
the center.
how do you do that? How do you, because you're doing two separate paintings, and yet you're doing one painting on one piece. And so does one side affect what happens on the other side?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you conscious of that?
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
When I'm yeah, I mean, it's something you have to think about all the time. You think about pacing, so things that are less important are smaller and you can have maybe spots. And then for a big moment, it could be a 2-page spread. And you have to pay attention to the gutter in the center because that's where it's folded. You don't want anything interesting or important to go on in the center. And yeah, and you want to, yeah, so the big moments are always going to be 2-page spreads, but sometimes like you can't get it all out in the way that you want to with only 32 pages, so you can sometimes get 40 pages.
Another thing, because you write too.
Yeah.
When you're writing the story, do you have to take into consideration how much text is going to be on the page too?
Yes. The sweet spot is 250 to 500 words. And they used to be longer. They could be 1,000 words or 1,200. But they always want the fewer words, the better. And as an author illustrator, it's nice for me because I can be looking at it and think that line could leave because that could be a drawing instead. Because I want to show, don't tell. That's the kind of the what you want to do. So yeah.
And in another sense too, because you're drawing for children, it's also a learning process for them, isn't it? So they'll see your illustration and would probably look at the text as well and compare the two, or kind of will help them read the story by looking at the illustrations.
Yeah.
I can remember when I was a child, I loved comic books. And I would only look at the illustrations. I could care less about the words. All I wanted to do was look at the pictures. If I really liked the drawing, I would then go back and read the story.
Oh. Well, I just heard someone this weekend, I went to a conference or a festival in Keene, and one of the speakers was saying you want to try to draw what's happened just after what you read so that it continues the story along. Yeah.
I'm also curious, I sort of threw this at you before, but you've actually had experiences where children have read your book and parents have told you about reactions to reading one of your books.
Yeah.
What's it feel like when you know it's a successful book?
I love that. It's so nice when the kid knows it by heart and they're thinking they're reading it to their parents. It's really cool.
Oh, I bet that is.
Yeah.
I bet that.
Yeah,
now, when did you start doing your illustrations? How long ago? How long have you been doing
Well,
this?
my first book came out in 2001.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And you have children also.
Yeah.
Do they have any influence on your work?
They do. I mean, it's really fun to
Because we know your dog does.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think directly whether they do. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I remember this age so well, and there's, watching your kids react to stuff and the expressions that they have and that sort of thing influences more. I don't know that I've written a story that had my kids in it. But I do find, as I was mentioning to you earlier, that when I tell them bedtime stories, they're stories that have happened
they're pretty much
to me.
adults now, your children, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I don't tell them.
So are some of those
anymore.
stories that you told them as a child that you turned into a book form or not?
Oh, I wish I could say I did. And my kids have often, and still sometimes, every once in a while, one of my daughters who's 16 will say, will you make up a story for me right now? And I find it so hard to do on the fly like that. I will sometimes do it and I'll let my mind wander and I'll make up a story. But yeah, I haven't had a lot of success doing that. It's really much harder for me to do that. But I have told them stories of things that happened to me a lot as a kid, and they love doing that. And then I make that into books.
We were also talking about your life as a child. You grew up on a farm, is that correct?
Yeah.
And you said that's a very, very influential point in your adult life in terms of what you do now. Explain that, would you please?
I don't know why that's the case, but I lived on a farm from when I was 6 to 13, and that is the age that I remember the most of my life. I remember so much from that time. I remember so many stories of what happened. And then from then on, it's a blur. I just don't remember that much about high school. And that period, I totally know what a kid feels like then.
You told me other authors have that similar experience.
Yeah, I went to a conference in January, and I got together with a small group of my friends, and I was just curious. I was like, what, do you guys feel like there's a period that you remember so well from when you were a kid, and is that the age that you write for? And they're like, yeah, that's my age. I do YAs, and I work with young adults, and that's the age that I remember, you know, high school or whatever. But yeah, it seems to be a common theme.
So how many children's books have you done so far?
Well, I've done some for smaller publishers, so it's like 6 or 7.
6 or 7?
Yeah.
You got a new one in the works?
Yep. Yeah, one's coming out in a year, and I think I might have just, my publisher said it might come out in September. It was supposed to be November, but it's really a back-to-school book. So yeah, it's coming back next year, next year.
How do you get your ideas? How does it pop into your head? How did this King of the Chorus, how did you?
Well, King's Chorus, that was somebody else's story, so I didn't think of that
let's try
one.
this one then.
My Dog Lyle are all the
Okay.
stories
Okay.
that my dog actually did, and that's, that I put together, I wanted to write stories about the dog, and because at the time I remember people saying, you know, write about what you know about. And there were so many funny stories with him, and then I organized it by adjectives. So with each thing that he did, with each antic that he did, I had it an adjective. So then she described her dog with these adjectives that were compounding on top of each other. So that's where that one came from. This one, you know, I was often the new kid in schools, and so I totally knew what it felt like to be the kid who wanted to pretend to be a cat. And it was actually directly due to this little boy, Simon, who was my daughter's good buddy when they were little. And he dressed in, he had this red pair of footy pajamas that he wore for I think it was 4 months straight. And he thought he was Clifford the Big Red Dog. And he only took them off to take a bath when his mom was washing the suit, and then he'd put it back on, and he was Clifford. No doubt about it. And this kid ended up becoming so many other characters as he got older. He just would immerse himself. So kids do that a lot, and it's for different reasons, you know. But my character, I felt like it was because he was shy, and it was like a way of getting
as an
out.
adult, how do you think as a child? How do you think as a young person? How do you know a child's going to like your work?
I don't, but I really think like a kid. When I'm in a grocery store and a kid is struggling with something and the mother can't figure it out, then I'll just say, like, well, the kid's shopping. Just say we're checking out. You know, don't say get over here, put away the cart.
Good
you know.
For you.
So
Good for
it's
you.
just the way I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think you'd have to have some childlike. You can even be an old man like me and feel you're a kid sometimes. You know?
Yeah. We all have it in
We
us.
can do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's a special gift you have to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Is drawing children difficult?
Yes.
Tell me why.
You know, I have an easier time drawing animals, I think, first of all. Part of it is that we know what people look like so much that it's really hard. I mean, you know, you draw too.
Mm-hmm.
I find it difficult, but I also love the challenge of trying to show emotion in the way the stance is with the child and the face. I like the challenge. So it's very difficult, and I like doing things that are difficult because it's really exciting when you figure it out.
Yeah, but you take this character like Tiger, for example,
Yeah.
and you've got to have him in those 32 pages. You've drawn him one way in one setting. Do you have to draw him from different kinds of angles so you get a
Yes.
feel of him from more than just the front view?
Yeah, and it's really hard.
Is it like practicing a piano where you practice out or you work it out? How do you do it? And of course, it's a cartoon, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a caricature.
A caricature, right? So what you've got to do is to create a character that you can view from all kinds of angles. And how's that work?
It's really hard. With this one, there's a lot of straight-on views, and I have a couple that are three-quarter views. But I find that to be very, very challenging, and it takes a lot of work to get the right one.
Because it's all in your head. It isn't something you can extrapolate from another child.
Yeah, and it's also tricky because with this kind of drawing, each line makes such a huge difference in how an emotion would be, the direction of the eyebrow, or the edge of the mouth, or whatever. You can change what this kid is thinking so easily with just a flick of the pencil. Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to talk about these other pieces that you brought in today.
Yeah.
Can you explain the technique and?
Yeah, well, how I got into this, you know, as I said before, I was a fine artist first, then I started doing the illustrations, and then while I was in the middle of this book, when I was doing a bunch of sunrises and sunsets, I was suddenly just feeling an inspiration to start painting again, and using a lot of medium and doing it in kind of a textural way. And I stumbled upon encaustic, the painting with wax, and I tried to imitate it with cold wax that you can mix, like thick wax, with acrylics or with oil paints, and work with a palette knife. And I was playing around with that. I did a bunch of like 5 or 10 paintings with that, and then I started playing around with collage for some reason. It was just something that took over in me. And then I took a workshop in encaustic at R&F in Kingston, New York. They make the paints there. And I learned how to use them, and then I started taking pictures of my kids, and also I just came across old antique images, and I found myself continuing with the narrative. And so I would like taking... These are
even stories as well, aren't they?
These are stories as well, and what I'm finding I'm doing is that I find a character, and I imagine, like, these were, you know, stiff period. A lot of them are kind of Victorian era people that are standing there stiffly, and especially the kids, you know, they don't want to be standing there in front of the camera. They want to be like fishing or, you know, doing something else. And so I kind of imagine what is going on in their heads and what they'd rather be doing, or what they run to do right after this is over and they take off their Sunday clothes, you know, and do their thing. So I made a bunch of paper doll ones, working with this medium, and really enjoy it. This, I feel like, is a little bit of a bridge piece. I just did this week because I wanted to play more with texture and color, and with other elements, old postcards that I used in here and down here, and then scratching in here. I scratch into the wax with a sharp object, and then I smash oil stick in it, and then I buff it to pull it off. And same with this little boy here. And again, I'm finding that I'm using the children's book stuff in both of these. And what I found really interesting and fun this year is that I was invited in January to have a solo show at the Danforth Museum in Framingham with my fine art and my children's book stuff. And I was keeping them secret from each other. I have 2 separate websites, and I felt like I was doing one, and then I was kind of cheating on the other when I was doing it. I just kept them separate. And when they wanted me to do both, and they asked me if I would do a lecture about it, and I was able to sort of think in it, and then I realized how much they really do feed on each other. So I'm finding that once I started doing this, then I started doing more collage in my children's book stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can we see a book like that in the future, when done with that technique?
I hope so. I've been playing around with, there's a couple stories that I just am sending my editor now, and I'm considering doing it with collage with a little bit of the wax stuff. I haven't decided, but I've been playing around with it, so there might be. I hope to.
Yeah. You told me you've written a novel. You're working on a novel, is that?
Yeah. We'll see where that goes.
Is this going to be illustrations in it too?
Well, I wrote one novel that I hadn't decided exactly where it was going to be heavily illustrated. I've done a bunch of illustrations to go with it, but I've been thinking all along that it might be a graphic novel, but it felt a little daunting. I wasn't really sure how to go about doing that, and I finally think I have an image of how that's going to go. So I'm excited to jump into that, and because that's been sitting in a drawer for a little while, because my picture books are sort of more ready to go, and that's what I've got the reputation in with the publisher. So, yeah.
I just want you to know this has been a really lovely interview. It's been nice meeting you, and I love your work.
Thank you so much.
And I think you're going to have great success. You already have. And you're an inspiration to fellow artists.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on Exploring the Arts with me.
You're welcome.
That's That's it.
That was fun.